And finally, we're going to be traveling to Circle Pines, Minnesota to meet with Jim Olson. For years, Jim has been building a reputation as one of the finest luthiers in America, and we wanted to ask him about his production techniques. In talking with Jim Olson, one of the things you have to talk about is tooling and equipment. How much of this stuff in here did you design or build yourself?
Well, I made quite a few specific things for guitar construction. I'll try to, off the top of my head, bring up a few. One important thing is fret spacing. If you don't have proper fret spacing, you don't have a guitar. You know that, obviously. If you can't tune it properly, it's never going to go anywhere. So I have a arbor, which is a long shaft with 20 saw blades mounted on it that I made specifically to cut those slots right to the 1,000th of an inch. So it's mindless. I'm not dependent upon a pencil line and a saw in inaccuracy. That was one very important thing I made early on. There are other ways to do it with one saw blade and indexing it, but I chose to do 20 on an arbor. Another problem, and one of the biggest projects I ever undertook, was people have to get rough sawn wood to thickness and smooth. And you can't use a knifed planer because it's so thin it tears up the grain. So you have to sand it to thickness. One of these machines in 1982 cost about $10,000, which was about more than I made in a year. So it was sort of out of the question. So I'd go rent time on them, and that was about $37.50 an hour to rent time back then, and the overall quality of the sanding was not that good because you were going fast and the operator that you were watching do it wasn't aware of your needs, of how important it is to keep it uniform. So I set out to make a sander. Most people will make a single drum sander where you wrap sandpaper strips around a drum and pass the work under it. Well, I got a little overambitious, and I tried to copy a production-made $10,000 sander. And I went over to the floor room of the machinery sales place and began trying to measure it up and copy measurements to copy it. Of course, I was the butt of much humor. Sure, you're going to make one. But eventually, a year later, I had built abrasive sander that to this day is absolutely essential to my success in this business. I would never make it again now. I would buy it. But back then, I had no choice. So that was one of the bigger specialty machines I made.
Jim, how'd you get started building?
Oh, I was a woodwhacker from a little kid. I just loved hand saws and sawing stuff. I couldn't use a power saw. I built your typical birdhouses and race cars and things of that nature. When I was 12, I started playing guitar, and it seemed to be a really neat thing to try to make because it was made out of wood. But how do you do it? I just didn't know how. And as years went by, I kept up that desire to try to do it. And books became available. And through the books, I was able to get a start, at least, how to bend the sides. That was one of the hardest things that I could imagine, not knowing how, was how do you bend wood like that? In fact, I asked a vocational school instructor, I said, how do you suppose they bent this wood? And he said, do you think they might have sawed it out of a solid piece? That was his answer. He had no idea either. But in the mid-'70s, a book came out. That got me started. I never schooled with anyone. I basically learned trial and error the hard way how to build guitars. But the wood experience that I had accumulated from a youngster with fooling and diddling was all applicable to helping me build guitars.
So there was no mentor or somebody you apprenticed under?
No, not really. There was a guitar maker in the cities that I learned about the time I started learning to build guitars, and I did go into his shop and look around, kept my eyes open wide, but helped with a few little minimal things that I was able to see him doing, yeah. I didn't study with him, nor did he formally teach me anything.
So in this overall process, how much did you devise, or how much did you learn from books?
What I learned from the books was, this is where the fret should be spaced, you know. I wondered how you figured that out. I learned that. I learned Well, by observation, I was able to look inside of guitars and go, that's the size the braces are and things. So I did that by observation. But the books helped me, like I said, learn to bend the side. Just subtle little things. But it's sort of a common sense thing, really. If you see the object, you know the end. Now you've just got to devise a way to arrive there. And trial and error and tooling sort of developed naturally out of the need to create the way to do it. You find a way to do it.
How much experimenting do you do in your design?
I experimented on every guitar for the first 300, I think. Every one I did different things on. Now people want the same guitar that they heard and saw and played in my shop. They go, how will I know it's going to sound like this? So I'm pretty much trying to build the same guitar as far as sound playability as what they've heard. I still like to now and then try subtle little things on guitars that I have the luxury of experimenting on, but it's not that often anymore.
So consistency is really one of your main objectives.
At this point, they want the same guitar that they played that their friend owned or that they heard James Taylor play. They always say to me, if I order one, is it going to be like James's? So I want to be certain that it's pretty close.
Some guitar builders seem to have kind of a mystical approach, something I think you call voodoo, to their building. Yours seems to be a much more scientific approach.
Yeah, I'm not really into some mystical tap tuning, esoterical type, philosophical builder. It's just nuts and bolts kind of, really. It's braces, wood, braces in right places, right sizes, necks that are accurately fretted, space-wise. People want some kind of secret that I can tell them why my guitars sound like they do, and I don't think there is any secret. People say sometimes personality of the builder is imparted into the guitar, and I don't know if I can believe that or not, but it seems that one builder can build something almost identical as another, and it sounds quite a bit different, and I don't know what made that difference exactly. I don't know why my guitars ended up sounding like they do. I do know that I changed things and tried to get the best sound I could, but even that's subjective somewhat as to what is the best sound. But I don't have any secret I could tell you that, you soak this in something or you brace on a full moon, with a pot of water boiling spaghetti on the side or something. I have nothing like that. I think it has to do with correct placement of braces, the proper weights of them, and thicknesses of woods.
How would you describe the tone of an Olson guitar?
Well, I think originally I started out like most hand makers do. We're going to copy a Martin. I built dreadnought guitars. They were strummer guitars for the most part. In recent years, probably since, not even all that recent, times goes by so quickly, but since the advent of the Phil Kagi cedar top, I've been more known for light gauge, responsive fingerstyle guitars. Describing the sound of it, I guess the cedar is very responsive, much like a classical guitar, in that it doesn't take a lot to get it happening. It has a lot of peripheral type harmonic clarity, transparency, warmth. It excels if you kind of sit back and let the guitar work rather than you working the guitar real hard. And that seems to be... people will say to me, gee, I've already got my Martin and I've got, this and that, but I don't have one of these. I think that's what helped me get into the market. Now, however, there are lots of guitars being built, and I'm not claiming I was the first of this genre by any means, but I mean there's a lot of the cedar top, smaller bodied, responsive guitars being built now. But in the beginning, I think that's what people would say is, gee, I've never had one quite like this. This is really interesting.
At this point, Jim, what do you think is your greatest satisfaction or joy in building a guitar?
Initially, it was Well, seeing the thing come together, I mean, every day, little part of it coming together. Initially, that was, it with the completion of an instrument that you're so proud of. And then as you get into 200-300 guitars, it becomes a little less to see the guitar in its finished state. It becomes more of the process of creating it becomes the joy. And I would say that at this state, my greatest joy comes from utilizing things that I have made to a great advantage, like you build something to make something and that works so well. You go like, oh, I can't believe it. I go into my wife, Sue, this thing works just great. I've spent all this time doing this thing this other way, and now this new thing, I can do it so much more accurately. I get a better product. It's easier. That's where I get great satisfaction. And I have lots of ideas to improve things, but they all take time. Improve tooling, mostly. The product I'm pretty content with, although I'll always try to improve it. But